Well, one of the biggest stories of 2025 quietly unfolded this past week. And of course, Western media had almost zero coverage of something that's going to change the future of global financial markets. The BRICS organization successfully launched a new payment system that will allow 185 countries around the world the ability to conduct trade in Chinese currency and avoid using the US dollar altogether. Now, I've been covering the rise of BRICS for several years now, and it's incredible to see the momentum this organization is having. But most importantly, the interest from countries around the globe. Everywhere from Africa to Latin America, the Middle East to Southeast Asia, the vast majority of countries around the world are pro-BRICS and want to escape a world dominated by the US dollar and the threat of US government sanctions and bullying. And this is not just me saying this. Top Western news outlets like Bloomberg have published forecasts showcasing how BRICS Plus will dominate the world's GDP in the future. By 2050, the G7 will control only 18% of the world's GDP, while BRICS will control just under 50%. These stats are remarkable, and it's why Bloomberg is sounding the alarm bells and publishing stories warning that BRICS is getting increasingly hard to ignore. I mean, things are getting desperate for the G7 when one of its key members, France, is now considering inviting China's Xi Jinping to its annual meeting in France next year. I highly doubt Xi will accept the invitation because why would he? China is at the center of BRICS growth, and most importantly, the Chinese currency has been exploding in popularity, with more countries taking on RMB loans today than at any point in history. And this is a fascinating development because for years we've been told the renminbi could never go global since it's not a fully convertible currency like the US dollar. For years, financial experts have told us that the US dollar will always be king because of its status as the world reserve currency. But when you look at the data, it's remarkable to see how fast China's currency is closing the gap. Over the past 5 years, Chinese banks have quadrupled the amount of RMB loans, deposits, and bond investments they hold overseas, now exceeding 3.4 trillion RMB equivalent to about $480 billion. This surge shows just how quickly China is expanding the RMB's presence in global finance. Last month, the Bank for International Settlements released a new report estimating that overseas bank lending in RMB to developing countries rose by $373 billion in the past 4 years. And this is why China's role in BRICS is so important, as developing countries are now turning to not only China, but China's currency for their future. In the past 2 months, we've seen multiple African countries, including Kenya, Angola, and Ethiopia, switch their loans from US dollars to Chinese RMB. Indonesia and Slovenia recently announced plans to issue RMB bonds. And last month, Kazakhstan's development bank sold a 2 billion RMB offshore bond at a yield of just 3.3%. Again, none of these stories are making the front page of Western news because the majority of them are located in the global south and outside the United States sphere of influence. But once you remove yourself from the Western media bubble, you'll realize the majority of the world holds a much different viewpoint on China. Most countries in the global south, and specifically in Africa, are eager to engage with China. Earlier this summer, at the height of Donald Trump's global tariff war, China made an unprecedented move no one saw coming and signed a zero-tariff trade agreement with 53 nations in Africa. The deal was monumental because never before have we witnessed a rising superpower like China secure the coordinated effort of an entire continent and a comprehensive plan to reshape global governance. But here's where things get interesting, because it's not just developing countries in Africa signing these deals with China. Remember earlier last month when Donald Trump flew to Malaysia, Japan, and Korea for meetings with various leaders? Trump and the U.S. government wanted to project American power and influence in the region. And of course, the White House was quick to report Trump's visit was a major success. But here's the story you probably have not heard. Less than 24 hours after Trump left Southeast Asia, the region collectively upgraded its free trade pact with China. This is important to understand because it's actually ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is China's #1 trading partner. Last year, the economic bloc of 11 Southeast Asian countries conducted over $771 billion of trade with China. And Singapore's Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong, had this to say about the region's new trade deal with China. The upgrade will further reduce trade barriers, strengthen supply chain connectivity, and unlock opportunities in future growth areas. Translation: Donald Trump isn't winning the trade war. Instead, countries around the world want to move towards a more reliable and stable partner, which so far in 2025 has proven to be China. 2 days after Trump left Asia, Indonesia raised over $842 million through the first ever sale of Chinese yuan bonds. These yuan-denominated bonds are called dim sum bonds and refers to bonds written in Chinese currency but sold outside mainland China to offshore investors. But here's what makes this story remarkable. Indonesia isn't borrowing in US dollars. Instead, they chose to borrow in Chinese renminbi, and global investors absolutely flooded in. The Indonesian government offered 6 billion yuan worth of bonds, but investors placed orders for 18 billion yuan, 3 times the amount. This just shows you how bullish international investors are on Indonesia's economy, but also how comfortable they are holding Chinese currency as an investment. And that's the main message I want you to understand about this global shift in finance. About a decade ago, nobody wanted RMB bonds. But today, countries are funding their infrastructure projects using Chinese money. And most importantly, investors are lining up and actively buying Chinese RMB bonds. When we zoom out and look at the global picture of what this really means, it's actually quite simple. China is becoming the financial anchor of Asia, and every time a major country issues government debt in RMB and not US dollars, China's currency gets one step closer to becoming a true global alternative to the US dollar. To show you what I mean, just look at this chart from SWIFT, which shows the RMB share of global trade finance has quadrupled over the past 3 years to 7.6%, 6% in September, making it the second most used currency in trade finance after the US dollar. When you look at this chart, the trend is unmistakable. China's RMB is exploding in global use. Back in 2016, cross-border RMB payments were almost non-existent, but over the past 5 years, quarterly transactions on China's KIPS network have surged to nearly 13 trillion yuan every single quarter. KIPS stands for China's cross-border interbank payment system and processes more than 52 trillion yuan. That's nearly 12.7 trillion worth of transactions every year, accounting for 58% of all of China's cross-border flows. Even more impressive, the network now connects 4,800 banks across 185 countries. Just last month, China and South Africa, both key members of the BRICS alliance, launched the first ever BRICS loan in Chinese yuan, marking the two countries' first ever financing project conducted entirely in the Chinese currency. The funds will be directed towards development projects across Africa, focusing on infrastructure, energy, manufacturing, water management, and education. And honestly, this is why more countries in the global south are interested in working with China. No country on earth has developed as fast and proficiently in the past 40 years as China. And many developing countries would like to follow in their footsteps and modernize their countries in the same fashion. But once again, it's not just developing countries. Fresh after Trump's visit to Korea, the Korean president met with China's Xi Jinping and signed a new currency swap agreement worth 400 billion Chinese yen, worth more than $49 billion. The deal between the Bank of Korea and the People's Bank of China will be in place for 5 years and once again allow China and Korea to conduct trade in their respective currencies and avoid the US dollar usage altogether. Right now, 1 in every 13 international trade deals are settled in Chinese renminbi. But with the new BRICS payment system, we are only going to see this trend continue to rise and less transactions around the world made in US dollars. For the Global South, this is a major win. And the reason I bring you this update now is because studying geopolitics will help you understand market trends and become a better investor. And I want to transition into the investing portion of today's video and give you an update on a company I profiled earlier this year called Vizsla Silver. Take a look at what this stock has done this year alone, up nearly 158% year to date. A lot of you have written to me about how well that company has performed. Well, the same team that helped put Vizsla Silver together is now going after copper, one of the most important critical minerals in the world today. The new company is called Vizsla Copper, trading on the Canadian markets under the symbol VCU and the US markets under VCUFF. And if you're interested in how geopolitics, dollarization, and critical minerals are reshaping our world, this is the story you're going to want to pay attention to, because right now, every government is talking about the same 3 things: energy security, supply chain security, and securing critical minerals at home, not from overseas rivals. Copper is at the center of it all because you can't build EVs, charging stations, data centers, or new power grids without huge amounts of copper. And the West is suddenly realizing that relying on foreign supply is a serious strategic risk. And that's where Vizsla Copper and their latest deal come in. The company just announced the acquisition of the Palmer Project, an advanced stage copper, zinc, silver, gold project in Southeast Alaska. This is an exciting mine location sitting in a proven belt that already hosts major operations like Greens Creek and Kensington. But here are the key points you need to know. First, the resource is already big. When you combine the indicated and inferred categories, Palmer holds about 17 million tons of material with a 3% copper equivalent grade, which is considered high grade in today's mining world. Number 2, the drill results are impressive. Some of the latest holes hit long intervals of massive sulfide carrying strong copper and zinc grades, plus bonus silver and gold. These are the kind of numbers geologists love. And third, the project is de-risked. More than $116 million have already been invested into the Palmer Project, and as a result, it already has access roads, key permits, and existing infrastructure in place and ready to scale. In other words, Vizsla Copper isn't starting from scratch. They're stepping into an advanced project in a strategic U.S. jurisdiction at a time when Washington is openly talking about the need to honor critical minerals. The Palmer Project has even received direct support from the White House. The company just announced a non-brokered financing of up to 25 million Canadian. And the plan is to use that capital to aggressively explore and expand the resources at Palmer in Alaska, continue drilling other projects in British Columbia, Canada, and cover the acquisition cost and general working capital. Now, behind all of this is a team with a very real track record of success. You have Craig Perry, chairman and CEO of Vizsla Copper, who is also a co-founder of Inventa Capital and a founding director of NextGen Energy. I actually had the pleasure of speaking with Craig on the phone to learn firsthand about this deal, and it's incredible what he and his team are doing on the project. I always love companies run by CEOs with a great track record, and Craig has one of the most successful resumes in the mining industry for the last 25 years. But if you were one of my subscribers who took advantage and bought Vizsla Silver earlier this year, you definitely want to research more about Vizsla Copper and see if it deserves a spot in your portfolio today. Please contact your own financial planner for more advice before making any investments, and please do your own research. Invest responsibly, and as always, understand the geopolitics behind the ticker symbol. Everyone, I want to thank you all for your continued support, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video.